Good afternoon. Welcome, everyone. My name is Krystyna Moglinicka. I'm head of the International Cooperation Department at Zbigniewa Raszewskiego Theatre Institute. And we are hosting this event together with Ujazdowski Castle, Center for Contemporary Art in cinema. We are very happy for it. And there are three organizations that came to organize this event, also Warsaw Observatory of Culture. And now I would like to give a floor to the host, to Leszek Napiątek, researching director.
Deputy Director on Resources. Hello. I guess you can see me on the other side of the screens. I'm happy to have you here. Thank you for coming here, Sebastian. I remember when I was working in the culture department of City of Warsaw, I was participating in the Eurocities Culture Forum. It was meetings of the officials responsible for culture, and then I first time met with On the Move, and it was almost 20 years ago, as I heard from my colleagues. So I'm very happy that On the Move is growing, that artists are they are mobile, and happy to you that you participate in this evening. So.
Thank you. Łucja Krzyżanowska, Deputy Director of Warsaw Observatory of Culture. Please.
Thank you. Good morning. On behalf of the Warsaw Observatory of Culture, I would like to extend a warm welcome to all of you. It's wonderful to see so many people joining this event, which we have a pleasure of co-organizing with such an excellent group of partners. The Warsaw Observatory of Culture is a local government institution focused on both art and research. Our mission is to observe cultural trends and support artists. We run artistic and research residence, and we study the conditions and challenges that artists face today. In the coming days, we publish a report focused on art parents, individuals who combine parenting with creative work. We are also currently researching how art studios function, with the goal of proposing an optimal support model for artists to city officials. In both of these projects, we also touch on the topics of artistic mobility. We believe in dialogue, sharing experience, and continuous learning. That's why initiatives like On the Move are especially close to our hearts. The ability to move safely and freely is a powerful source of inspiration for artists and a key ingredient for growth. And intercultural exchange helps expand the world of art. It's all about sharing, learning from one another, and creating together. We'd especially like to thank On the Move and Sebastian Hoffman, and the touring artist, as well as our friends from Zbigniewa Raszewskiego Theatre Institute and the Ujazdowski Castle Center of Contemporary Art. It's a joy to be working with you. And last, but definitely not least, on behalf of our planet and all of us, very big thanks to our guests who choose to travel by train. It's really grateful you made the extra effort to give here no more sustainable way. I wish you have an inspiration time and really good time, and enjoy.
Thank you so much. And last but not least, Anna Galas-Kosil, Deputy Director of Zbigniewa Raszewskiego Theatre Institute and former president of On the Move Network.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I'm really happy to be here and host or co-host this event in Warsaw. And thanks to green mobility, it's not only safe for the planet, but it only creates possibilities to stop in different cities and give this kind of lectures. to not make it too long, because I think that we already heard a lot. I just want to say that I'm really glad that after many years, when the Raszewski Theatre Institute was the only one member, or the only one Polish member of On the Move, we are already in bigger group, and this event or this meeting is just a proof that we can be stronger together, and we can collaborate, and we can also promote mobility within Polish cultural field, and especially in Warsaw. So thank you, and I'm really happy that we can host you, Stefan, here. Thank you.
So the presentation will last around 40 minutes, let's say. We counted it more or less like that. And if you will have any comment or question, please do. The event is hybrid, so you can leave a comment online and we will look on it, or you can keep a question or a comment for later after the presentation. Thank you so much, and I give a floor to you.
Thank you so much for having me. Hello, everyone. My name is Sebastian Hoffmann. Cześć, dzień dobry. My Polish is very limited, so sorry about that. Yeah, I work for the International Theatre Institute in Berlin, in Germany. And the International Theatre Institute is also a member organization of On the Move, just like the three organizations that just introduced this workshop or event. And my role with the International Theatre Institute is specifically the German mobility information point touring artists. So that's a project that we run together with two other German organizations in the dance and visual art field. And I'm going to talk a lot more about what the mobility information points do and how they could be helpful for your practice and for your work in the second part of this seminar. In the first part, I'm going to introduce a little bit what On the Move actually is and what they do for those of you who are not familiar with the network, with the platform yet. We already talked a little bit about green mobility. So why do we talk about this? We're actually meeting again on Sunday and Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday in Riga in Latvia. And so I'm going to meet some of you, some of my colleagues in Riga next week. But I chose to do everything by train from Berlin, so I have to stop. So I'm stopping today in Warsaw to give this talk. And then tomorrow I'm going to Vilnius and then to Riga on Sunday. I also just do this for fun because I like trains. The Cultural Mobility Forum in Riga is not only an event that you have to be at, but you can also join online. So the event in Riga, at least the public part, will be live streamed as well, just like this event here. So hello everyone on the internet who is watching this. And you are also going to receive a PDF file of this presentation via email, and then you can also click on this link, and then you can join or register for the live streamed Culture Mobility Forum that will take place in Latvia next week. So quick overview of what I'm going to talk about in this short presentation. So as I already said, I'm going to give you a quick introduction to On the Move, to those of you who are not familiar with the platform yet. And then I'm also going to talk a little bit about Culture Moves Europe, which is a very exciting and very accessible new funding scheme by the European Commission. And these two kind of parts of the presentation will hopefully give you some answers to this question: where can I find opportunities or financial support to realize my international projects? And then in the second part of the presentation, I'm gonna go a little bit deeper in the work that I do for touring artists for the Mobility Information Point, because our role is not to find opportunities for you, but we're there to help you and guide you when you have found your international project and struggle with bureaucracy, with administrative, legal issues, because there are quite a few of them, and I'll give you a very short introduction to 5 kind of obstacles or legal issues that we encounter a lot when it comes to international work or cross-border work. And then at the very last, I'm going to present what the mobility information points or MIPs do and how they can help you navigate these administrative obstacles and regulations. And then, of course, at the end, there's time for questions. So a quick introduction to On the Move. On the Move is an organization, and primarily also a website, an online portal. On the Move was created in 2002. It's based in Brussels. And On the Move is kind of like I think the most important platform for international cooperations in the culture and creative sector. This is a screenshot from their website, so you can see kind of the 4 larger sections of information that On the Move provides online. Everything is for free, so you don't have to subscribe to On the Move, but everything is accessible for everyone on the website. So we have funding guides, which I'm going to talk a little bit about, open calls, resources, and then the mobility information points, which are kind of organized as a subgroup or as a working group within On the Move as well. So funding guides are basically free PDF files that you can download on the On the Move website. And they're documents that compile or put together funding programs for international mobility, focusing on a particular country or region, or sometimes also sector. Here's a screenshot of the mobility funding guide to Poland. As you see, it was last updated 8 years ago, so it's not that up to date anymore. I don't know if there are any plans to update it. But these mobility funding guides are quite useful to kind of get a very general idea of which organizations are active in funding international cooperation to or from a particular country or region. So these funding guides don't include one-off open calls or the one specific residency action or program that will only take place once a year, but instead the funding guides include information on more long-term funding programs that may be available every single year on a regular basis. Just a few years ago, I think last year or 2 years ago, On the Move also published a sector-specific funding guide on music in Europe, with or in cooperation with Music Export Poland. So here's a screenshot of the Poland-specific funding programs that are listed in this guide. I think the guide has more than 500 pages, so that's page 339. So it's really, really extensive, and it features a lot of opportunities, funding programs specific to the music sector. And the most recent funding guide that On the Move published is for the Baltic and Nordic regions, so Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, Finland, Norway, and Sweden, Denmark, I think. These are included. And this funding guide is already accessible on the website, but it will be kind of officially launched next week in Riga as well. So these are the funding guides, and again, they're kind of for mobility to or from a particular region. So if you have plans to go to Lithuania, then you should definitely check out this new Baltic Nordic guide, because there may be some kind of funding program that also supports incoming mobility to Lithuania from other countries. Right, so then open calls. This is kind of the next section on the Move website. Here's a screenshot of that page from a few days ago. Open calls are curated open calls for international cooperation, project funding, residencies, etc., that are more like one-off programs. So, for example, for a specific anniversary or for a special occasion like European Capital of Culture or something like that. On the Move's editorial team is quite specific regarding which calls are actually listed and presented here. So they're usually open to all nationalities. Sometimes they're only open to people living in a particular region, but they're quite inclusive. So On the Move doesn't feature bilateral calls, for example, that only support mobility from one country to another country, but usually these open calls are open to a very, very wide range of potential applicants. Also, there's never an application fee for the programs that are listed here. And in most cases, they actually include a fee or payment or scholarship or something like that for the artists or cultural professionals that participate. On the Move also has filters, as you can see here, for opportunity type, destination country, if they're online or in-person programs, if they're for individual artists or collectives, groups, and then the art form, discipline, and the kind of thematic area, which could be something like green mobility or artificial intelligence or something like that. So when we consult people, then we always highlight, and On the Move basically has the most well-curated selection of international open calls available on the internet. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. So highly recommended to check in with this website to find new opportunities. On the Move is, of course, also active on social media, so you can follow them on LinkedIn, Facebook, I guess, if people are still on Facebook. And they also have a newsletter, so you can also subscribe to the newsletter. It's available in several languages. And the newsletter also has a selection of these open calls that are available on the website. Moving on to resources, publications. On the Move is also very active when it comes to doing research on new trends when it comes to international mobility. And the organization publishes these findings in free and accessible PDF documents that you can also download on the website. So, for example, there's a new report called Intersecting Temporalities, At-Risk and Displaced Artists in Transition, on particular struggles and problems that displaced artists face, but also there's a report, Cultural Mobility Flows, which is a kind of report on what the mobility information points did last year, how many consultations we gave to artists and how many events we took part in. They're usually available in English and French. And then, so that was kind of On the Move, very brief explanation, quick introduction, so that you know that On the Move exists. We're here, we're member organizations, and it's a very, very valuable resource for international mobility opportunities. I want to also quickly introduce Culture Moves Europe, and especially the Individual Mobility Action Travel Grant. So Culture Moves Europe is a fairly new program that was established by the European Commission. It's officially run by the Goethe Institute in Brussels, but they're more like the administration behind it. Culture Moves Europe is very, very interesting because it's also a very accessible and open travel grant, because it is open to everyone, to every artist living in the European Union and in countries that are part of the Creative Europe program. So these are not only EU countries, but also the ones listed here at the bottom of the screen. So Albania, Armenia, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Georgia, Iceland, Kosovo, Liechtenstein, Montenegro, North Macedonia, Norway, Tunisia, and Ukraine. Switzerland and the United Kingdom are not part of Creative Europe. So that's always quite interesting. So what is Culture Moves Europe? You can apply for a travel grant if you live in one of those countries and if you want to go to one of those countries. Yeah, so it supports international mobility, for example, from Georgia to Poland, from Poland to Iceland, from Germany to Austria, etc. You have to have a small project idea to apply for Culture Moves Europe. which kind of fits in one of these 4 categories. So you maybe want to explore another country's cultural heritage, do some artistic research, investigate, get inspired, so it's very open. Or you want to create or co-create new works of art with someone in the other country. You want to learn, maybe take part in a workshop in Norway or Tunisia. Or you simply want to connect, develop a professional network, maybe participate in an event, strengthen your professional development, engage with new audiences, etc. So Culture Moves Europe is quite open in a way, but it does not support travels or journeys to present work that you already created. So I think that's the kind of very important thing about Culture Moves Europe. So if you want to present a dance piece or take part in an exhibition and show work that you already created, you cannot apply for a Culture Moves Europe travel grant. You also need to have a partner in the other country, in your destination country that you would like to travel to. But this partner does not need to be an organization or a legal entity or something very formal. It can simply be another artist. So if you have a collaboration with a friend or another artist in another country and you want to create something with them, you can definitely apply for a Culture Moves Europe travel grant. You can also apply as a group, up to 5 people. And at the moment, you cannot apply. So that's the bad news. But there will be, this is the kind of latest update that I got, there will be another open call in October 2025. And compared to other European Union funding programs, it is very easy to apply for a Culture Moves Europe individual mobility action grant because most of the grant is an online form. So you need to simply put in your data, the project proposal, and then depending on how many days you're going to the other country, the grant will be calculated automatically. So you don't have to submit a budget or a finance plan or something like that. Another interesting feature of Culture Moves Europe is that you can also get so-called top-ups, meaning that if you, for example, want to bring a family member, you get a little bit of extra money. Or if you don't fly, you get like a green mobility top-up. Or if you need to apply for a visa. So for example, if you live in Tunisia and need to apply for a Schengen visa to come to a Schengen area country, you can also get like a little visa top-up through Culture Moves Europe. I've also heard that there will be some probably small changes to the program for this next open call that we expect for October 2025, but I guess the general idea will stay the same. So in a nutshell, I think Culture Moves Europe is a very, very accessible grant, probably one of the most accessible grants there are in Europe to support this kind of small-scale individual mobility or small group mobility to create, co-create, learn, connect, etc. Okay, so now you know that Culture Moves Europe exists. Very good. All right. So then we're already jumping to the second part of this short workshop, seminar, talk. And we're gonna jump into something that's quite boring, quite technical, but quite important as well, because legal or administrative regulations regarding cross-border work are something that are quite important to at least know about, so that you are not rejected at the border, for example, that you're let into the country that you want to go to, that you know how much money you get paid, etc., etc. So the kind of key points for administrative regulations of cross-border work is basically that it is quite complex. There are lots of special regulations for working across borders. some of these are somehow coordinated on a European Union level, such as social insurance, value-added tax to some degree. Others are more based on bilateral agreements between two countries, like, for example, taxation, income tax. And others are only rooted in national law. Like, for example, the question, does a non-EU citizen need a work permit to work in Poland or in Germany? And what we see a lot in the work that we do, consulting, advising artists, is that we often see that self-employed or freelance artists struggle a lot with these regulations because they are in a way bound or subject to exactly the same regulations or legislation that big companies, big corporations also have to deal with. But big companies have special departments. They have human resources departments. They have specialized lawyers and tax advisors, etc., that deal with these issues for their employees or for their companies. But lots of artists and cultural professionals don't have a tax advisor. They don't have a lawyer that knows about this very kind of niche or specialized law or these specialized administrative regulations. But they still have to comply to some degree at least so that they don't run into problems. Another, I think, quite important thing is that sometimes there is like a difference regarding what the law says and what the regulations say and how things are actually done in practice. This is sometimes just due to very pragmatic reasons. Maybe an artist or a cultural professional simply doesn't know that they did something wrong, and then they just do it. Yeah. But sometimes it's also for pragmatic reasons. I mean, when I talked to my to the old director of our institute, he always said how dance companies in Germany sometimes use little boats to put stage decor to Switzerland to evade the border guards. Yeah? So I think there's always like this little bit of like leeway or pragmatism involved to regulations as well. But in my role doing this workshop today, my job is basically to tell you how things should be done, but this doesn't necessarily mean that you always have to do it that way. Because artists, especially when they're emerging artists or smaller artists, sometimes don't really have a choice because they cannot afford or hire or find a tax advisor or a lawyer, etc. So yeah, a lot of things are in this certain kind of gray area. All right, so then I kind of selected the 5 most important or most central kind of legal issues, and my goal is to just raise a little bit of awareness of these issues and to also maybe serve as a little checklist for you. So if you have international projects, then it could be good to kind of look back at these slides maybe or look on our website. I also brought a little travel companion here. This is our website partially printed out, not very green, of course, but you can take some of these for free. There's also, I think, some at the entrance. So starting with the question of visas or residence permits, some of the key points are EU citizens, of course, benefit from freedom of movement when we, as EU citizens, work or move to other European Union countries. So one of the biggest benefits of kind of EU citizenship is that freedom to work and to establish oneself, sell services, etc., in all other European Union countries. It becomes much trickier when we look at the situation of non-EU citizens living or working in European Union countries. Also, non-EU citizens who live in one particular EU country and have a residence permit for that country. because the main issue is that their access to the labor market, to working, is restricted to their residence country. So they don't have the same freedom of movement as EU citizens. So for example, if let's say like a Ukrainian refugee who lives in Germany wants to work in Austria, then their German status of a like temporary protection doesn't give them any extra rights to work in Austria. It only gives them the right to work in Germany. So that's very, very tricky to navigate, because non-EU citizens living in the EU also work across borders a lot. And so they always have to check what is the national work permit or labor market access regulation of the country that I want to go to, that I want to travel to. I'll give you one example, a real case from our consultation work where that didn't work. So a few years ago, we consulted a non-EU citizen who had a German residence permit. So that person was allowed to work and live in Germany according to their German permit. And then they went to Norway to give a few lectures at a university there. Norway is also in the Schengen area, so traveling to Norway is no problem because the German residence permit allows you to travel freely in the Schengen area. And Norway also has a kind of exception from a work permit. Norway says you can be a university lecturer here if you're a non-EU citizen, if you don't live in Norway, but only for a maximum of 2 weeks per year. Yeah, you can do that short-term, temporary. But in our case, that artist lectured in Norway for 2 months. And unfortunately, there was a control by the authorities. So it was found out, and then that person got a travel and work ban for Norway for several years. So that's why we always say, look, even if you live in the EU, you always have to check what are the work permit regulations in the other countries if you are not a citizen of a European Union country. So it's very important. In most cases, it can work because a lot of countries have these exceptions, but usually only for a very, very limited amount of time or for a very specific work activity. And if you are representing an organization based in Poland, for example, if you're an organizer, event organizer, for example, you then, of course, always have to check the Polish national immigration regulations if you want to hire a non-EU citizen to work here. When we look back to EU citizens, there's also sometimes the case that they want to go to a non-EU country to work there. And then I think it's always useful to look at these kind of 3 checks. If I'm an EU citizen going to a non-EU country, do I need an entry visa to actually enter that country? Do I need a work permit, or do I have to register somewhere maybe if I want to work there? And then the third, do I maybe need an electronic travel authorization? This is often the case when I don't need an entry visa. I still need like an electronic travel authorization. And there's 2 countries that are particularly worth looking at here, the United Kingdom, because we had Brexit a few years ago. So the UK is not part of the European Union anymore. And that also means for EU citizens, we don't have that freedom of movement anymore. We can't just go to the UK and work there, but we have to check, do we need 1, 2, 3? And in most cases for the UK, we would definitely need 3 now as EU citizens, because the UK just recently introduced this electronic travel authorization in April this year, so just like 3 weeks ago. I got my first ETA already, so it's quite easy to get. It's like 20 euros, valid for a few years. But you may already know it from the US, ESTA. It's like very similar. And the EU will, by the way, also introduce something like that probably next year for people coming into the EU without a visa. And then going back to Brexit and the UK, if I want to perform in the UK, I may need a work permit, but not a visa. Yeah? So it really depends on your individual situation. But whether you need something for the UK, there is a mobility information point in the UK that can help you figure out whether you need a work permit or not. And in most cases, it's actually quite easy to get because it's just a digital code and not an actual piece of paper, and you don't need to go to the embassy or consulate to get it. And then, of course, we have the US. I guess you all heard the news that there were many people denied at the border, also tourists who wanted to enter the US on ESTA, on the Electronic Travel Authorization. So it's definitely a very dynamic situation at the moment. And even before the current change of the administration in the US, the United States have always been one of the most restrictive countries when it comes to work visas, also for European Union citizens. But luckily, we also have a mobility information point in the US that can give you pro bono free advice on work visas for the US. They're also an On the Move member, and I guess we're going to see them in Riga as well on Monday. So that's just like a quick kind of overview of some of the issues that could arise when you look at visas and residence permits. Now it's going to get even more technical with every slide, so hopefully you can stay with me. So income tax and double taxation is a key issue, especially for performing artists. If you work in another country or have a client in another country, in some cases you could face double taxation. So that means that two countries have the right to tax your fee or your salary. The country that you live in, your tax residence country, because they can tax everything that you earn worldwide. And then also the other country, so where you perform, for example, or where your client is located. And the two services or two activities that are often subject to double taxation are performance fees. So if you perform in a country that you are not a resident of, for example, if you live in Poland and perform in Germany, and so-called licensing fees. Licensing fees are fees that somebody pays you to use your copyrighted work. For example, a visual artwork that you created, or a choreography if you're a dancer, or a composition if you're a musician. And the kind of good news about double taxation is that in most cases, you don't have to deal with it directly. But instead, whoever pays you, the organizer, your client, is obligated to take out this double tax, so the tax of the other country, from your payment, from your fee, and then forward it to the national tax authorities of the other country. And this is kind of like a pain in the ass, because you are taxed twice. So you have to find ways how to avoid it. And in some cases, you can actually avoid it completely based on a really case-by-case basis. So sometimes there are national tax laws that say, okay, you don't earn so much here, no double taxation. For example, in Germany, if you're a performer and you get a very, very, very small fee, 250 euros per show, per person, there is no double taxation in Germany. Germany doesn't want that money. It's like so small. Don't worry. And then there's also a few countries in Europe that have said, we don't want to do it at all anymore for performances. The Netherlands, Denmark, and the Republic of Ireland. Because they realize that the taxes that they can earn by taxing foreign or like non-resident performers is so little that the administration costs for their tax authorities is higher. So they got rid of it. So when you perform in the Netherlands, you don't have to worry about the slide. Very good. But if you don't perform in the Netherlands, and if you earn more than 250 euros in Germany, then you can also check if there is a double taxation agreement and a specific paragraph in that agreement that you can use or kind of activate to avoid double taxation completely. I'll give you another example here. There's a pretty good double taxation agreement between Poland and Germany, especially for performers, because it says we can avoid double taxation if the performance is funded by public money. And it doesn't matter where the public funding comes from. It can be Polish money, it can be German money, it doesn't matter. The only issue with this that you need to get a certificate from the German tax authorities that says we checked it and there is public funding, and this process takes about 12 months. Yeah. So it depends. Also can also create headaches. In some cases, you cannot avoid double taxation at all. And then in that case, it's really important to double check your contract or talk to whoever pays you to check what you actually agreed on. Is it the fee after or before the tax is taken out? So this can create a lot of misunderstandings. For example, I'm a performing artist. I'm going to France, and I have a contract for 1,000 euros, and I think that I'm getting 1,000 euros. And then the organizer says, here is 850. No, where is the 1,000? And it's like, oh, but we agreed that the fee is before I take out the French tax. And the French tax is 15% or something like that. So here is 850. Damn. Wrong negotiation. Yeah? So it's really a matter of how you talk about this with your organizer. But in any case, if double taxation happens, what's really, really important, get a certificate of tax deduction. So this is a document from the organizer, from whoever pays you, that specifically says, I already paid French tax of 15%, and I paid you 850. And you can then submit this certificate in your personal tax declaration in your home country. And based on the double taxation agreements, you can then often get a tax credit, meaning that your tax office will say, oh, cool, your tax was already paid in the other country, so we will take this into account, at least. We will lower your tax in your home country. But if you don't have it, then you don't have proof, and you're taxed twice. I'll give you another example here from a workshop I did a few years ago at the Reeperbahn Festival in Hamburg, like a big music conference. And there was a singer-songwriter from Estonia, living in Estonia. And she said that she traveled and toured all across Europe all the time. And she always negotiated net agreements with the promoters. So she always negotiated exactly how much she got after the taxes were taken out. And she was happy with that. I was like, oh, great, okay, cool, yeah. At least I know what I'm getting in a way. And then her tax advisor, she was lucky to have one, said, where are the certificates of tax deduction? Your promoters paid tax for you on top all the time. And then she got some of them retroactively, submitted them in her Estonian tax declaration, and got a tax refund of 7,000 euros. Because she was taxed twice all the time. And she didn't tell her tax office. So even if you have this net negotiation, then still ask for a certificate of tax deduction and give it to your tax advisor or your tax office. So these are some key points regarding income taxation, double taxation. For our work with touring artists, this is actually one of the main things that we consult on. So a lot of artists coming to Germany want to know how this works in Germany and how they can avoid it. Value-added tax is also quite complex. There is, however, some kind of coordination, at least in the European Union, regarding this type of tax. A lot of people kind of confuse income tax with value-added tax with VAT, but I think it's important to know the difference because they work very, very differently. Within the EU, I think the key point is that there is a sort of coordination for cross-border value-added tax that helps you to identify where value-added tax is due, so which country can charge or can take value-added tax, because it can only be one. That's very good. And who is responsible for it? So who has to actually declare and pay value-added tax to the tax office? And that's either the seller or the buyer. And for most artists, value-added tax for cross-border transactions is actually quite simple, because the rules are based on the kind of business-to-business, B2B regulations. So a lot of artists are like, I'm not a business. Yeah, you are in a way, because within the European Union, there's only a differentiation between a private consumer and a business. Yeah, so the term business also means self-employed persons, freelancers, NGOs, associations, etc. So business is somebody who does business in a way. And if you, as a business person, as an artist, sell your service or your works of art, your goods, to another business, for example, a theater or a gallery, then it is a B2B transaction, business to business. And in this case, the European coordination rules say the so-called reverse charge procedure kicks in. And that means that the answer to these questions are value-added tax is always due in the country where the buyer is registered. So where, always not the country where you live, where you are registered, but the other one. And the answer to the question, who is responsible? Not yourself, but the buyer. So it's the kind of responsibility is moved, shifted, transferred to whoever pays you, your client. And that makes it quite easy for you, because you simply write an invoice without any value-added tax and write a sentence on it saying, no value-added tax charged because I am not responsible, or something like that. You can also use more elegant language, like due to the reverse charge procedure, I am not responsible. And then whoever pays you, the buyer, is responsible to pay value-added tax on top of your net invoice and declare it, pay it to their tax authorities. Within the EU, there is an extra kind of compliance part, however. Both need the so-called international value-added tax identification number. And this is basically just proof that you are businesses. So even if you're like a small business or a freelancer or a self-employed artist, you can still get this international value-added tax ID number just to identify you as a business person. When you sell your services or your goods to private consumers, so B2C, private business to consumer, you are responsible again. And this can become extremely difficult when you sell across borders, because then maybe you have to charge your private clients value-added tax of the other country. So not the country that you live in, where your business is registered, but maybe French value-added tax. And it's not that easy to do that, because you would have to file a French tax declaration. But there are some ways to make that easier, especially in the EU. So we have the one-stop shop where you don't have to register in France, but do it from Poland, for example. And also we have a new small business scheme, which is very interesting, very new since the beginning of this year. If you have any questions on that, you can talk to me later. But yeah, so B2C transactions are quite difficult regarding value-added tax, whereas B2B transactions are quite easy from the perspective of the artist. I'll kind of leave it with this. Value-added tax is also one of the most complex issues, maybe just to give you one example of a B2C transaction, this is becoming quite common in our consultation work. I don't really know why, but we get a lot of requests from stand-up comedians lately who sell tickets to their own shows, touring across Europe. And if they're selling tickets to private consumers. So it's a B2C transaction. So when they use, for example, Eventbrite or like an online ticket selling platform for their show in Spain, they have to charge Spanish value-added tax because the show happens in Spain. Theoretically. They probably don't do it and nobody ever finds out. So this is this kind of pragmatism. But that would be their kind of compliance, actually. They could now use, for example, the new small business scheme to sell them without any value-added tax. So that's the kind of one of the advantages of this new scheme. All right, so we're gonna go into 2 more topics, and then I think time-wise we're still okay, right? Okay, cool. I think we're gonna end in 10 minutes. So social insurance is the next topic. Within Europe, also quite coordinated, which is a very, very good thing. Europe, in this case, is actually more than the European Union, because Switzerland, Norway, Iceland, Liechtenstein, and the UK, despite Brexit, still are taking part in this kind of general coordination of social insurance. And by social insurance, usually we mean health insurance and pension insurance. This kind of coordination framework in Europe has a few golden rules. And the best rule for us as insured workers is that only one country can be responsible for social insurance. And that's fantastic because it means that we don't have to pay twice when we work across borders, but we only pay once if we have to pay our own contributions, for example, or if the employer pays them, etc. However, we cannot choose the country that's responsible for us. So we cannot say, I would like to be insured in, I don't know, Spain because it's cheaper or something like that. But the country that's responsible for social insurance is primarily defined by the actual physical territorial place where a worker works. So that gives us a problem because a lot of artists and cultural professionals, they move a lot. They work in different countries. For example, I'm working in Poland today, not in Germany. So based on this general principle of territoriality, I should have health insurance in Poland right now. But I don't. Because I am currently considered a so-called posted worker, meaning that I am only in Poland temporarily. Now, I don't live here. I'm going to Lithuania tomorrow. So my work assignment in Poland is just for 1 day. And that means I don't have to get health insurance in Poland. Instead, my German health insurance continues to be valid, even for my work activity in Poland today. But I have to do something about it. It's not automatic. I have to get a A1 certificate. I actually got one as a PDF file. I wanted to print it out, but I forgot. So my employer told my health insurance provider in Germany that I'm going to Poland temporarily today. And then my health insurance provider in Germany said, thanks for letting us know. Here's the A1 certificate. It's free of charge. And it's a certificate that's valid all across Europe. So these countries that participate. So it always looks exactly the same. So if there was a control right now by the Polish social insurance authorities, they would maybe ask me, are you insured in Poland? Because you're working here right now. And I could say, no, but here's my A1 certificate. And then they say, fantastic, bye. But if I didn't have it, they could say, here's a fine, because you should actually be insured in Poland because you work here. So the A1 certificate is kind of like a protective shield around you. It gives you protection in case you work abroad in Europe temporarily, because there could be a control. A lot of artists have never ever gotten one and nothing ever happened. Yeah? Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, yeah, but I think that in Polish case it's really complicated and it's related to the law regulation, because the freelance artists in Poland, they don't have the social security paid in Poland, which means when they go abroad they cannot get A1 certificate. And I have this experience that, for example, for artists traveling especially to France, because France always obliged artists to give or show them the A1 certificate, it's really complicated.
Yes, I totally understand that. We also have a lot of feedback from freelance or self-employed artists living in Poland who struggle with actually signing up as a self-employed person, because it's much more difficult than in other countries. And what we see a lot at the moment is that a lot of Poland-based self-employed artists use these kind of online billing services to invoice their clients in Germany, for example. So yeah, it is not that easy. It should be easy though. Yeah. So because it's based on this European Union like kind of framework of the coordination of social insurance. There's another kind of special case if a worker permanently works in 2 or more countries in Europe. They have to check which country is responsible for their social insurance, because it can only be 1, not 2 or more, to avoid double contributions. And then they also get an A1 certificate as the kind of result of this check, who's responsible. This is mostly a case for cross-border workers who live in a border region. Yeah, so for example, if I'm an opera singer living in Munich and working as a freelancer in Germany, maybe as an opera teacher, but I'm also employed by an opera house in Salzburg in Austria, then I need to check which country is responsible for me. And in this case, it would be Austria, even if I live in Germany, because the status of employment is considered to be higher than the status of self-employment for these permanent work activities. And then when we look at non-EU countries, you often cannot avoid double contributions because there is not a lot of coordination. So for example, if I go to, hypothetically, the United States, and maybe the US says, if you work here, you also have to take out American health insurance because it's American law. And then I still pay for my German health insurance. So I pay twice. But in Europe, we can avoid that through the A1 certificate. So again, A1 certificate, quite important for some countries, as Anja said, because in a lot of countries, especially for performing artists, France, Belgium, Spain, Italy, I think the top 4, they don't really know this concept of self-employment in the performing arts. So when you perform there, the organizer's first kind of reaction is, we'll employ you as an employee, even for just one evening or one performance. And then you need the A1 certificate to tell them, no, don't do that. Because with the A1 certificate, I also take my national health insurance legislation with me. So I say, you don't have to employ me. And if I'm not employed in France, I may get more money because the organizer doesn't have to take out French social insurance contributions. All right, so last quick point or area in our little kind of whirlwind tour through fascinating legal areas of cross-border work. Customs. This doesn't affect so many performing artists, but especially visual artists, because they tend to travel with their works of art. Within the EU Customs Union, we are very lucky as well, because we also have a kind of freedom of movement for objects. The movement of goods is free. So when I take visual artwork from Lithuania to Finland, I don't have to do anything. Yeah, I can just take that artwork with me because we're in the same customs union. However, there are some countries that are part of the Schengen area that are not part of the European Union and also not part of the customs area. Switzerland, Norway, Iceland, and Liechtenstein. Yeah, they are part of the Schengen area, so there's theoretically no borders, but there's still customs borders. So if you want to take your artworks to Switzerland, you will have to deal with Swiss customs, highly likely. And then, of course, another quick reminder, Great Britain is a completely new customs area after Brexit. I specifically say Great Britain here because Northern Ireland is in a very special position. They're kind of both in and out, so very complicated. And when you want to move your goods to another customs area, to, for example, Great Britain or Switzerland or the United Arab Emirates, then it really depends on whether you want to move your goods temporarily, for example, for a show, for an exhibition, or permanently, if you want to sell them, for example, a painting. If you're just moving goods temporarily, there is a customs document that maybe some of you have heard of before, the so-called Carnet ATA. ATA is a kind of French-English abbreviation for admission temporaire, or temporary admission. So when you just bring your stuff to the other area temporarily without selling it. And you can apply for this Carnet. Usually it's the Chamber of Industry and Commerce in the country that you live in that gives you or issues this Carnet. It's a little piece of paper, and it's a kind of passport for your stuff. So when you cross into the other customs union, you have to show it. It has to be stamped. And when you leave again, stamped again to check whether your stuff is still with you and that you didn't sell it in the other country. And if you want to move your objects permanently, then you have to check, is there maybe a tariff? For example, if you want to sell your works of art in the United States. Or if there's import value-added tax, which is usually just the value-added tax of the country that you go to. And then if you're traveling with goods that contain protected materials, such as protected animal species, woods, then you should also look into the so-called CITES certificate. This is often a problem for classical music orchestras because they have very old instruments that contain endangered or protected species. So that's a quick kind of whirlwind tour through legal areas. And if you now think, oh my God, this is all too much, who can help me? I want to kind of bring you back to the mobility information points, the MIPs. So as I said earlier, these are organizations, there's 10 of them at the moment, that help you tackle all of these issues. And what's particularly interesting for you is that they focus on incoming mobility to their countries. So if you live in Poland and if you have questions on double taxation in Portugal, then you can ask the mobility information point in Portugal, Loja Lisboa Cultura, and they can give you advice completely free of charge. Because all of these MIPs have a few common things. Everything is free. It's always for all sectors. Yeah, so not only visual art, but also dance, theater, music, etc. There's going to be a new one. So we'll have a 11th MIP next week, I think, in Sweden. So Sweden is the latest country that decided to establish or become a member of this kind of working group of mobility information points. And as you see, they're mostly located in European countries. There's one in the US that I already mentioned, Tamizdat, who are very specialized on this issue of work visas for the US and, of course, in the United Kingdom because of all the new Brexit laws. What do we do as MIPs? Some of us can give you a personal consultation. I think most of us actually do that. So you can email us. You can even schedule a meeting on Zoom or on the phone to simply talk to us for an hour for free. this is mostly what I do. That's my job. With touring artists, we are the kind of most active MIP regarding consultations. We do roughly 1,500 every year. But we also have online information. So kind of like on the move, we have websites that have introductory texts, checklists, etc. on these issues, usually with a focus on our national context, like how does it work in Germany, how does it work in France, etc. Some MIPs provide actual legal advice. We don't, for example. I'm not a lawyer myself. I pretend to be, but I'm not. But our partner organization in the US, for example, Tamizdat, is actually staffed by real immigration lawyers. But the fact that not all of us are lawyers is sometimes also good because we are practitioners, we are cultural professionals, so we know how to explain things, we speak the language of our target group. So sometimes we also have this specialized knowledge that a lawyer or tax advisor may not have because they are not specialized in the arts and culture sector. And then we do workshops and seminars like this one. So you can hire us as well as an organization to talk about a specific topic or give you like an introductory seminar like this. And that's pretty much it. Sorry for going a little bit over, but I think it's okay, right?
That's totally okay.
Cool, okay.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
That
no
was extremely informative. Thank you so much also for the examples, because I think it helped a lot, and also navigating through visual arts and performance. And now I would like to ask if you have any comments or questions.
Hi, thank you so much for such informative presentation. And I have a question. Do the according Culture Moves Europe, do the artists with the residence permit of Poland but having no citizenship of European Union can apply for these grants?
Yes, I think they can. So Culture Moves Europe is completely independent of nationality. So the two criteria are you live in a Creative Europe country and you want to go to another Creative Europe country. And then it kind of depends on your individual case. Like how long do you want to go to the other country? Because usually if you have a residence permit as a non-EU citizen, you can only go to another Schengen country for 90 days. But I think Culture Moves Europe is for 21 days maximum only anyway, so it doesn't support longer mobility. And then the other question is, are you working in the other country as part of your mobility there? And then it really depends on the other country if that's allowed or if there's some kind of exception, like in this Norway example that I had earlier. So in Norway, you can work as a university lecturer for 2 weeks per year as a non-EU citizen, but not for 3 weeks. So it really depends. Some countries are a lot more flexible when it comes to that, like France or Germany are like, yeah, you can kind of do artistic activities for up to 90 days per year, and we don't really check it. Whereas other countries like Sweden, I think is quite restrictive. They're like, yeah, if you're a non-EU citizen and you don't live in Sweden, you can only do certain performance activities for a maximum of 14 days per 12-month period. So it really, really depends, and it's always really good to check in advance. Of course, in reality, nothing happens sometimes, because there's no check. But it can happen. So it's always good to maybe do that research before and be aware of the risk as well.
We've got another question online about the same funding.
Yes, so there are 2 questions on chat. Does Culture Moves Europe support participation in festivals in South America or USA? And is there any program which can support artists who would like to show their works on festivals in South America or USA or Australia?
So Culture Moves Europe, no, because it only supports mobility within Europe or within the Creative Europe countries. And when it comes to the other question, are there mobility grants to present work at festivals in the US, in Australia, and Latin America? It really depends on your sector, on what you actually want to do there. Do you want to participate at the festival as a kind of delegate, as a kind of cultural professional, or do you want to perform there as an artist? So I don't have the answer to that, obviously, but I think...
Can we find it on the MOVE website?
Maybe. That would be my guess. That would be my first kind of research attempt, would be checking the mobility funding guides of the country that you live in and your destination country, to check maybe there are foundations, government institutions that fund that type of travel. Maybe there are none. And then you maybe have to become a little bit creative. So then you can maybe reach out to private foundations that are maybe particularly interested in supporting your type of work or your topic. I don't know, sustainability, for example. In some sectors, it can also make sense to go into sponsorship, like to check whether maybe if you're a musician, you can get in touch with an airline or with a guitar manufacturer. Say, I'm going to do an Instagram post and promote your guitar if you give me 2,000 euros to go to Rio de Janeiro or something like that. Can work. Yeah, so it's like a wide kind of area. I think this idea, like, what this question, where do I get the money? And I think there is millions of answers to that question.
Thank you. Are there any other questions here on site? If not, I have one.
Cool.
I'm interested if you can tell more about the wording in the contracts. As I send you also my question via email. If we are artists, if we should really take care if there is a lecture performance or a performance or an educational performance written in the contract.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes, I guess. I think maybe the first thing is this term contract is sometimes also a bit like, ooh, that's so much, you know. It's like a lot of, especially emerging artists, they are afraid of signing a contract or having a contract. But I think from our perspective, anything can be a contract. So like an email or WhatsApp is a contract. And the more details it has in it, the better, regarding the amount of money, the location, the service, etc. And looking at your question, like, does it really matter how the specific service is named or phrased or what type of words are used? It can totally make a difference, especially for cross-border work. So just to give you one example or two examples here, if you're, for example, non-EU citizen and you live in Poland and then you go to Norway, using that example again, and your contract says university lecturer and you do it for 10 days, it's probably okay, you can do it. But maybe your contract says lecture performance. And in Norway, maybe lecture performances are not covered by this 14-day exemption. So that could mean that you need a Norwegian work permit to do that, you know? So it depends on the exact terminology sometimes. And then the other example would be regarding double taxation, because a lot of countries, they only apply this idea of double taxation for very specific performances. And it really depends on the country of how they define performance.
The same is with workshops, right?
Workshops are really, really like almost impossible to know what they are, because according to the German logic, this is the only national tax law that I really know, a performance that would trigger this double taxation in Germany is defined by showing something. This can be anything, you know, but it also specifically says a scientific lecture is not a performance. Yeah? So then it depends on how you phrase not only the workshop in the contract, but also in the advertisement material. Because the tax authorities will not only look in the contract, but they will also look at how is this actually advertised? What did this person really do? And then if it says, for example, performative lecture performance in the advertisement, then from a German perspective, they would say, yeah, that's a performance because somebody showed something. That's maybe also entertaining. Yeah, so double taxation. But if the program says, scientific lecture, this person will present the latest news in the academic literature on this particular topic, it is not a performance, and there would be no double taxation.
I have one more question. Do you think artists should rely on contact with cultural workers of the institution they are coming, so that, or do you get a lot of questions also from the cultural workers from the institutions?
We do, yeah. So I think this is also quite important for everyone in this audience and also on the internet, that the mobility information points don't only address artists, but also institutions, people behind the scenes, organizers, gallerists, companies, businesses, etc., because they often have the same problems. They also need to comply with legislation, but they maybe also don't have a tax advisor who knows exactly how things are done. So yeah, we also advise a lot of people behind the scenes, cultural workers and institutions. And I think just like any other worker, they sometimes get it wrong. But sometimes they also get it right because they know the workarounds. Like just as one classic example, this luckily we don't have that anymore, but a few years ago we still had this problem that Croatia was not part of the European Union Customs Union. Yeah, so whenever you wanted to go into Croatia, you needed to talk to a Croatian customs official. And they tended to be extremely mean, yeah, and not understand whatever you were doing. So I used to work as a tour manager, so I was behind the scenes as well. And from my experience, a lot of the promoters and concert organizers in Zagreb, for example, they always wrote me an email before and said, okay, tomorrow you're going to cross the border. Use this specific border crossing, not that one. Because at that border crossing, the people are mean. And at the other one, they're nice. Yeah? Or, for example, at the moment, when we look at this horrible situation of visa, or not visa rejections, but entry rejections for the United States, we had a workshop with Tamizdat, our partner in the US, and they said, if you want to come to America right now, fly through John F. Kennedy in New York, not via any other airport. Because the border guards at JFK, they're much nicer, and they understand what you're doing. Whereas if you fly through Detroit or LAX in Los Angeles, you have a much higher chance of meeting like a very angry border guard. So just out of experience. So I think it's kind of both. So sometimes I think people working in institutions, they know the best workarounds, but sometimes they also struggle themselves with compliance.
One more question came to my mind. And I will ask it before you, because we are talking about work and money, but sometimes, I guess, if you want to do something voluntarily with no earning money, like to perform or give somebody something, that might also be a problem. So if you can just like, how it looks from your perspective.
Huge problem, actually, because there's so many different definitions of work. So, for example, when we look at immigration law, for example, a lot of countries, they have this idea that even if you don't get paid, it's still work. Yeah. So, for example, the United Kingdom, they say if you come here to perform, you don't get any money for it, that's still work, and you may need a work permit to do that, maybe. Yeah.
We need mobility info points in every country, I
guess.
Totally. I think. Sorry, I think we have one more question, right?
Yes, but I'm not sure if it's a question to you, but I will ask it. Why there is no MIP point in Poland? And is there any chance to have one in the future?
It's a fantastic question. We would love to have one, and it would be just fantastic to get one. But I guess it's we advocate a lot for it. Yes, we think it would be extremely useful. Now we are 3 organizations in Poland, and then you've seen on your slide, like a guide about Poland 2017, where it needs a lot of specific work and money and effort to put together information that would be useful.
Totally, yeah. The German mobility funding guide, I think, is even older, by the way, so we also don't have a new one. But maybe just to say a few words about the general idea of establishing new mobility information points, especially in the European Union. That's something that we, especially also within On the Move, are advocating for. A few years ago, we were involved in a small project called Mobility Information Point Amplifier. So we got some money from ECAS, the European Citizens Action Service, an NGO in Brussels that promotes freedom of movement of European Union citizens. And they gave us some money to write a handbook on how to establish a mobility information point for organizations and countries that don't have one yet. And you can also download this report, this handbook, for free on the On the Move website. And we're quite transparent in this handbook as well, because we also disclose how much money we have, how much funding we get from our governments or local governments sometimes as well, how many staff members we have. It's all public information, it's public money, and also what the challenges are, because especially starting or setting up a new MIP takes time. We started out almost 10 years ago to get where we are now, and in the beginning we didn't really have a lot either. So my point of view is more like you can just be one with very little and then gradually also extend your services. A lot of MIPs in the beginning did not have a consultation service, for example. And then after 3 or 4 years, they had one. And sometimes it's not only having like a kind of like a consultation service on this very like structured level, but it also sometimes just helps to have an email address. Yeah, so that there is a person in the other country that may not have the answer, but they could maybe guide you or direct you to someone or another organization that could maybe have that answer.
And sometimes behind the... Oh, there is a question, please.
Okay. So I had this question for the cross-border business-to-consumer transactions, actually. Does it relate only to physical presence of doing a job, or what about the online services?
Very good question.
And selling goods, like I'm selling a picture to somebody abroad.
So do we have another hour? No, that's a very, very quick answer. Yeah, it's about all of these things. And the problem is that for these different types of activities, there's different regulations. So I'll give you a quick 3 examples. So if you're selling goods, like if you're shipping goods within the European Union to private consumers, then everything stays exactly the same as it is when you do it domestically. So it's the same as if you're selling the works of art from Poland to Poland. But if you hit a certain limit of 10,000 euros of shipments to other EU countries, only to private businesses, private consumers, not businesses, private consumers, then the value-added tax of the other country kicks in. Yeah, so then you have to charge your client the value-added tax of the destination country. A very similar rule exists for so-called digital services. Digital services are services with no human interaction. So for example, selling a download or a PDF or access to a video. We have the same 10,000 euro threshold for B2C sales. And then the last is digital services with human interaction. So for example, you're conducting a live streamed guitar lesson to a customer in France. And then there is no limit, but the value-added tax of the other country kicks in immediately. Yeah, so you have to charge them French value-added tax. Or you're using the new small business scheme, which you can do since January 1st, which is really fantastic because you can then use the French small business regulation and don't charge any value-added tax at all.
But to use this scheme, like you have to do something.
You have to do something. You have to register for the scheme in your home country where you registered, and then you get a new tax number for this, which is a new kind of EU-wide tax number with the suffix EX for exempt. And then you can sell completely exempt business sales, anything you want, in the entire European Union to private consumers, unless you hit the national small business threshold of the other country. So it's a lot of compliance. So in reality, I don't think many artists will do that. Maybe stand-up comedians who tour all the time and sell our own tickets. But it's definitely, it goes in the right direction. It's a fantastic new scheme, this new EU small business scheme.
I think it's a good moment to say that if you want to receive a presentation of Sebastian, please write to information point here at Ujazdowski Castle. Email is info.u-jazdowski.pl or to any of other institutions. We will send you the.
You can also just get in touch with us as well.
Exactly.
So touringartist.info, and yeah, my email address is also here.
I guess it's all. Thank you so much for coming.
Dziękuję. Thank you so much.
Dziękuję.
Vielen Dank.